Hello, everyone. Welcome to Taiko in Canada, a panel discussion about the impact of taiko drumming across Canada, hosted by the Japan Foundation, Toronto. My name is Philbert, and I'm the Program Officer at the Japan Foundation, Toronto. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator of today, Kiyoshi Nagata. Kiyoshi is the Artistic Director of Nagata Shachu, an award-winning taiko ensemble based in Toronto that was formed in 1998. Kiyoshi's career as a musician, performer, and educator spans over 3 decades. Also joining us are representatives from Midnight Taiko, Sawagi Taiko, and Raw Taiko. Kiyoshi, take it away when you're ready.
Before we start our panel discussion, Mr. Hayashi Eitetsu has a message for all of the panelists and participants today.
はい、カナダの太鼓の皆さん、こんにちは。カナダの太鼓の印象ですけどね、エドモントンの、グレッグ清水さんという人が、おじいさんが植えた桜の木で作ったバチを僕にくださいましたね。それが一番、強く心に残ってますけれども、日系の、移民としてカナダに移り住んでいろいろなご苦労を経験された方、そしてその次の世代、また次の次の世代、いろんな方がいろんな事情で日本とのつながりを求めて太鼓をやってらっしゃる方も多いかと思います。ですからそういう人たちにちゃんと日本のスピリット、精神ですね、そういうものが伝わるように、そしてそれを今度は太鼓の上で表現できるように、そういうふうにしていただけると、いいなと僕も希望しております。いろいろ短い時間では言うことが、全部は言えませんけれども、皆さんがさらに精進をして、日本の太鼓はいいね、かっこいいねって周りの人から言われるように頑張っていただきたいと思っております。それではまた皆さんにお目にかかるのを楽しみにしています。頑張ってください。
I'd like to welcome our panelists for joining this discussion on taiko, which is presented by the Japan Foundation in Toronto. As you heard, my name is Kiyoshi Nagata. I've been performing taiko actually now, from next year, it will be 40 years. I studied with Kodo 1993 as an apprentice, but before that, I was in a group called Toronto Suadaiko from 1983 to 1992. Where I had the opportunity to work with Daihachi Oguchi from Osuo Daiko. Currently, as you heard, I'm the artistic director of Nagata Shachu, and I also teach a credit taiko course at the University of Toronto for the last 23 years now, I believe. So it's been a long time. But it's not about me. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. So first, we have Teri-Lynn, or TL, from Midnight Taiko Kai. Midnight Taiko Kai is a community group of performance-based taiko drummers located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, who love to spread the art of Japanese drumming. The group was formed in 2006 by 3 members, Ruth Ablett, Ben Lim, and Jenny Zhao, who brought with them a combined 15 years of taiko experience from groups throughout Japan and the United States. The songs in their repertoire have strong roots from traditional taiko groups from the Kamikawa region in Hokkaido, Japan, but their inspiration comes from the rich and diverse styles of taiko ensembles from Japan and throughout the world. Next, we have Young Park from Raging Asian Woman Taiko Drummers, RAW. And I should let you know, Woman, spelled WOMXN, is a Toronto-based performing arts ensemble made up of East and Southeast Asian women. Formed in 1998, RAW carries on the diasporic taiko tradition that grew out of Asian American and Asian Canadian mobilization in the 60s and 70s. One of the few all-Asian, all-women taiko drumming groups in the world, RAW exists as a critical response and challenge to both systemic and internalized oppressions. RAW plays large taiko drums as creative resistance for social change, carving space for self-expression, education, and community building. Finally, we have Linda Uehara Hoffman from Sawagi Taiko. which is the first all-woman taiko group in Canada, founded in 1990. They are a multi-generational group of women of East Asian and Indigenous heritage, brought together by their shared passion for the Japanese drum. Sawagi means to cause a commotion in Japanese. With thunderous drum beats, stirring vocals, and martial arts-inspired choreography, Sawagi Taiko shares the empowerment and exhilaration they feel through taiko with its diverse audiences. They harness the power of the drum to support feminist and social justice ideals. Their spirit, creativity, and respect for one another can be felt both on and off stage. So let's begin our discussion. To start off, I'm sure people who are listening would like to know more about the origin of your taiko group, how you were formed, how you started, and in addition, how your group has contributed to the landscape of taiko in Canada. For example, Nagata Shachu, I think one thing, for us is that we've done a lot of collaborations with other artists from different genres of music. And I think that for us, has helped to expose taiko to Canadian audiences. But, I'm really interested to hear, what each of your groups are doing and, help to form the taiko landscape in Canada. So I'll just pick someone randomly. Why don't I start with Yang? Tell us a little bit about Raw.
Thank you, Kiyoshi. That was great reading. I wish I want to get a recording of you reading our little bio. So Raw was started in 1998 from three women who used to play with Wasabi Taiko. And Wasabi Taiko actually lineage is from Katari Taiko in Vancouver. So not only is there like a taiko lineage to Raw, but there's also, I think, a parallel development of Asian Canadian Coalition and, as you said in the bio, of social justice movement that started out in Vancouver that followed us to Raw in Toronto. So a lot of our influence, I think, in the beginning was the group was very internal looking. It was a lot about self-development, teaching each other, working as a collective, a lot of influence from San Jose Taiko. And I think in the last 10 years, we've started to really expand out towards serving our community more externally, in the sense of we really our community is really based in the women, the feminist community, the queer community, and then the Asian Canadian community. And then if you start to intersect those, I would say our core community is the Asian Canadian queer women community. That's really at the heart of our community base. So we're trying to create more programs to serve that. Our I said community like 10 times now, but yeah, our people. And we just found a studio for the first time in Raw's history, and starting to open up more classes and try to promote and support other QT BIPOC arts groups.
That's great. And I have to say, being from Toronto, it's not easy to find a taiko rehearsal space anywhere. You get a lot of angry neighbors, and rent is extremely high in Toronto as well.
Yeah.
And also, just to point out, you mentioned San Jose Taiko, which is one of the, I guess, the pioneering groups in the United States, as one of your influences. But that's a great story. Wonderful. Teri-Lynn, can you tell us a little bit about Mightnight Taiko Kai?
Sure. So our origins, basically, Taiko in Calgary started when a Aikido guru named Ben met a gal named Lisa. She had learned to play Taiko while living in Japan, and the two of them agreed to exchange art forms. So Ben learned to play Taiko from Lisa, and there was really no going back after that, for him at least. Lisa did move on at some point, but then Ben somehow connected with the other two ladies that you mentioned in your intro there, Ruth and Jenny, and the three of them started practicing together regularly. They didn't have a place to practice, so they used basements and garages and whatever random space they could come up with. Eventually, they started practicing at the Japanese Community Association Hall, where we still practice. And the group morphed into what it is today. We, a number of people have come and gone, but Ben is still in the picture. Jenny comes out and volunteers every now and then, and Ruth has moved overseas, so we don't see her, but we do still have that connection with at least two of our three founding members. A lot of people ask why we are called Midnight Taiko, and it's probably exactly what you're thinking. The founding members used to practice till midnight at times, and then get up and go to work the next morning. So hence the name. So nowadays we don't practice till midnight, but that's only because we don't want to get kicked out of the community hall from noise complaints from the neighbors. So that is our story.
Oh, that's wonderful. Your story kind of, I think, resonates with a lot of other taiko groups when they start off. Taiko are very expensive to buy from Japan. And so a lot of groups just make do with what they have, whether they're used tires or, homemade drums or barrels. So I think that really kind of resonates with a lot of groups that have started out in Canada. But yeah, it's a really interesting story. All right, so let's go to Linda from Sawagi Taiko. Love to hear your story.
Well, like I think most taiko groups in Vancouver, Sawagi Taiko came out of Katari Taiko, which was the first taiko group in Canada. We started because Katari Taiko was invited to the Michigan Women's Music Festival. And so the women in the group, it was an all-women's festival, the women in the group decided to go, leaving our two males behind who said they didn't mind. And so we went and we performed, and some of us just loved it. It was so exciting and wonderful to be surrounded by women who did everything. And so it was the women swinging the jackhammers that impressed me the most. But anyway, so we came back, and one of the men said, I feel kind of bad about being left out. And so we had this long discussion. We realized that if we had been asked to leave, because Katari Taiko, as a community group representing the entire JC community, was mixed white and Asian, because that's what our community is. And we realized that if they had said that we would have to leave behind, that they would accept only Asians, that we would have really had trouble doing that, because two of the women were white, and we would have felt badly, and we would have had longer discussions, and maybe we wouldn't have done it. So KT decided they would never take any gigs that excluded any of their members. But those of us who wanted to go back to Michigan said, oh, we want to go back. So we started another group. We had to create an entirely new repertoire in 9 months, which we did. And we went back to Michigan, and we were only going to play women's groups at that time. There were just a ton of women's festivals, and we were invited to all of them. And then groups started popping up all over Vancouver, And we decided, that's crazy to only limit ourselves to women's groups only. And so we just became a group. And we chose Sawagi as a name. And we've been going now since 1990. So a long time. We're old farts. I mean, we get new members, but that's kind of where we are. Is there anything else I missed out? No, I don't think so. I think that's us. Sawagi Taiko. Oh, and also we did a collab. Powell Street asked us to collaborate with a group for the festival, and because I had been invited to do a percussion singing show by an indigenous man, and I knew he had a group, I asked him if his group would be interested in collaborating with us. And so we started this collaboration in 2009. We've had many reiterations of various parts of it. And as a result of that, we got a member from their singing group who is now part of Sawagi Taiko. So we are now East Asian and Indigenous. Yes.
Well, that's a great story. It's always nice to hear how each of your groups have evolved over the years and how things change. And definitely, I know Linda has much more seniority than I do when it comes to years of experience because Katari Taiko being the first Canadian taiko group. But it was also interesting to hear that, I think it's a common story how groups splinter from one group. I know Katari, there's been several groups that have kind of formed from Katari, and as Yang was saying too, from Raw started off kind of from a different place. So I think it's really interesting how all these groups kind of evolve as tastes or styles change, I guess. But really, really, such interesting stories from all of you. That's great. We'll go on to the question 2. I think this is kind of a hard question because I've been asked this question before, and it's always hard to answer. But it's kind of a discussion about taiko in Canada versus taiko in Japan. I guess what the differences are or similarities, and also how has Japan influenced taiko in Canada? It's kind of a loaded question, I think. I don't know, Teri-Lynn, would you like to take a stab at this one?
Sure. Yeah, it is kind of a loaded question. I kind of feel like taiko in Japan is probably evolving to some degree, same as it is here in Canada and probably anywhere else in the world. The times that our members have gone to Japan to study taiko, we've practiced or learned from some really amazing taiko players, like from the locals living on Hachijojima to the nationally recognized taiko groups, and then all the way up to former retired members of Kodo. So we've seen a broad range, and when I first started playing taiko, I was taught some things, some styles and techniques that I haven't ever seen done in Japan. So it kind of made me wonder a little bit. And then it was in 2019, our artistic director and I were in Tokyo watching this taiko festival. It was just hours of nonstop taiko. It was amazing. But just watching the groups there, I really noticed that there were what seemed to me clear differences in styles and stances, different kinds of strikes, different form, different ways of using the drums, and even the bachi. Like bachi seemed to be bigger in Japan, and even when playing shimedaiko, they tended to use bigger bachi than what we use. So I do think there are some differences, but I also think that what we see and learn when we do travel to Japan or have a Japanese instructor come here to teach a workshop or something like that. We take from that. We learn from what they're teaching us, and at least I know with Midnight Taiko, we try to kind of embody that style when we are playing songs of Japanese origin, like traditional songs or songs that are written by a Japanese composer, and of course we do the same for pieces that are written by for example, a Canadian or American composer. We try to play it in the style that they intended the piece to be played in. So but even then it's probably an indirect influence that Japan has on the taiko that is being composed elsewhere in the world. So yeah, it's that's probably a conversation one could have for hours.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's multi-layered for sure.
Yes.
I always find that North American taiko groups are sometimes very careful. They don't want to like offend like kind of tradition or whatever, and they're kind of walking on eggshells and stuff like that. But then again, I see a lot of taiko groups in Japan that are just like over the top, and so it's like, oh, I guess they have the right to do it because they're Japanese. But it's like such a loaded question. But yeah, I think it was very well put. Young, how about you? What do you think?
My answer will be really short because I don't have enough information about Japanese taiko. I came into taiko through Raw, so it's my understanding of taiko is very rooted in North American, and specifically Raw's sort of cultural lens, which is so. The only thing I can really compare it to is going to Casa Mix, and so very short amount of time to interact with Kodo apprentices, and then probably like sporadic interactions with Japanese teachers at North American Taiko conferences and stuff like that. I think one of the bigger differences, I'm going to speak specifically about Raw with in comparison to a lot of Japanese groups, or how groups are structured, is the hierarchy of senseis, and then sort of regulation of what is allowed, and that as you continue up in the group. Because Raw came from a very collective model, uh, we're actually starting to come back to a bit of a hierarchical structure, but there's a lot more, I would say, general input from everyone in our group, and I find that with other North American groups where it's maybe there's director and managing directors and stuff, but there's a invitation for people to speak their thoughts and bring those feedbacks into decision making. The styles, yeah, I'm going to just leave it there.
No, that's great. How about Linda? What are your thoughts?
Well, the thing is that having come out of Katari Taiko, we were taught by Seiichi Tanaka, who's Japanese. I'm like, Japanese. He was pretty heavy duty at that point. People tell us that he lightened up. We don't know, but he was quite stern, and he gave us 2 workshops over a couple of years. And so when we started Sawagi, we had that training in our heads. But since then, because it's been many, many years since 1990, Sawagi has pretty much just gone its own way. I think we feel as a group, I hope I'm not speaking for people when I shouldn't be, but I think we feel as a group there is a North American taiko, and we are part of that. And yes, it comes from Japan, and we absolutely credit Japan for giving us taiko, but I think we feel that we can do whatever we want with it because it's ours here. And we have already made a difference. I remember when we visited Kodo at one point with KT, they called it Sunshine Taiko because Kodo at that point was like so serious and strong and powerful. And actually, when we first saw Kodo, we never wanted to do taiko. Who would want to, I mean, we were all women mostly, and we didn't think that is not really. But then San Jose Taiko came up, and we thought, oh, they look like us. They're having fun, and we want to have fun. And so Kodo called it Sunshine Taiko, right? And that's what we liked. And so I do think that there is a base of knowledge that comes from Japan, but I also think that in North America we have changed it, added to it, um, you know, developed it in a different fashion. And I think that's good. I think any art form needs new, fresh ideas and new blood. And certainly all kinds of music that's come to North America has been changed. So,
Yeah, very well said. Yeah, if I could just add my 2 cents, like I know in Japan, a lot of the taiko groups are associated with local festivals or community groups, and it really becomes impossible for Canadian taiko groups to replicate that. And so I think you're right. We need to just create our own voice, or like respect the tradition, but say something new with our experiences as Canadians, and do something new. And I've heard, as you're referring to Kodo, like I've heard that the reverse happened, where a lot of North American taiko groups influenced Japanese taiko groups and got them to lighten up a bit when they played. So I think it works both ways basically. But that's great. Really, really great answers. So I think we're to our third question, which is, how has your taiko group influenced the local community it belongs to? Maybe you've partially answered that in previous questions. What does it mean to your community? I know for Nagata Shachu, we're in the east end of Toronto in Scarborough. There's a lot of Chinese, East Indian, Middle Eastern immigrants. And for us, it's become quite important to reach those groups through free workshops and free. We go into schools and perform in priority neighborhoods where there's a large population of these immigrants. And so I guess for us, that's our way of trying to serve our local community. I'm wondering for the rest of you how you feel about this. Let's see. I think I'll go back to Young.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the word community 5,000 times again, but yeah, the way we serve. So in all those different categories of communities, the LGBTQ, the Asian Canadian women's, all those different groups and how they intersect, we try to make sure that we are serving groups like queer Asian youth. We try to set up workshop series for them every year. During May, Asian Heritage Month is when we go into schools that have a big Asian student population, so that they are not just getting to see taiko, an Asian art form, but also gets to see whole bunch of Asian women on stage who don't look the typical Asian women. And then we also share stories of our experience as Asian Canadian women, from being teased as a child, for being Asian, to like non-binary, genderqueer members who are like get caught being yelled at for using the women's room because people think that they're, all these things that, kids are going through, and so hopefully they can relate to stories like that. Yeah, a lot of it are how we serve is through our performance. So we try to be pretty picky about what events that we're performing at, and a lot of our events are around social justice issues where we can bring the volume of taiko to, you know, in, a rally or yeah, things like that. For example, this in 2021, I don't know if you remember, there was a shooting in Georgia. It was really like when the anti-Asian racism was rampant. There was a rally at Phillips, downtown Toronto. So we played at that, and it's things like that where we feel most like we're doing our what we're meant to do, which is echo and social activism together.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, if you've ever seen Raw, just a little plug, they're an amazing group. Um, you guys really, kick some butt when you play, and they have a really huge following in Toronto, so that's wonderful. How about Teri-Lynn? Um, so basically, how has your taiko group influenced the local community it belongs to?
Well, I guess in some ways quite differently than Raw. All of our members are also members of the Calgary Japanese Community Association. And of course, we practice out of their building. And so we're quite connected with them, and we've developed quite a good relationship with, with the folks in that community and the leaders of it. We try to help support them in ways other than just playing taiko for them. Like we'll volunteer, help serving a dinner that's being put on for seniors, or cleaning up the yard in the spring, or, things of that nature, fundraisers. But of course, they do ask us to perform at community events that they put on, like the annual Omatsuri, of course, the Calgary Stampede pancake breakfast that they put on. And, of course, I think that having some fun, upbeat music at these events adds a little bit of extra energy and zest, and they appreciate that. And of course, it's a huge benefit to us to have the support from them. We also like to think of ourselves as advocates for Japanese culture, and we do make an effort to go out and I guess increase awareness of Japanese culture in Calgary and area, and I think that's recognized among the people of the Japanese community in town. So it's kind of a give and take relationship that we have with them.
Yeah, I think your story, again, kind of resonates with a lot of taiko groups that are based in community centers or Japanese cultural centers or churches. It's kind of a reciprocal relationship where, you know, um, you might, they might give you like the free space, and in return you perform at, their festival or something like that. But yeah, I think it can be a very mutually beneficial relationship, to be involved with, a local church or a local community center. Not always, but me, but
Yeah.
hopefully most of the time it works out. But yeah, that's great. How about Linda? How about yourself?
Well, Sawagi, from our beginnings, because we started as going to Michigan Women's Festival, where there are lots of queer people. In fact, it's mainly organized by and for queer women. We have had in our membership queer women always. And I think people know that. And we have a lot of support from the women's community in Vancouver. We have been asked to play at benefits for them, which we do. Um, in recent years, well, of course, it's been the pandemic, but even before that, there seems to be a drop off of interest by women's groups in doing things. I don't know why that would be, but anyway, we seem to have got fewer requests for benefits. We still play for unions, certainly, um, because we're also known in that community as supporting unions, and we are known for supporting social justice causes. So I think and also because we practice at the Japanese language school, which is in the downtown east side, and we have always had a strong connection with that area through Powell Street Festival. And so I think that, that our roots in social justice issues are very well known. And the fact that we're all women um, is an immediate draw for those people, right? And I, it's very hard in this time to remember what life used to be like. I have to say, um, but um, but I mean, we remain the same. Our goals are the same, and I think we're quite well known for those goals.
That's great. Actually, what you just said at the end too is a nice segue into the next question. um, how has your group adapted to the pandemic? So, what does your group offer and what events are coming up? This is your real chance to kind of plug your groups and let them know what you're doing. If are you teaching taiko? Is it available for anyone who wants to learn? I know for us during the pandemic, Nagata Shachu, I mean, everything was virtual and digital this and virtual that. I think everyone's getting a little bit tired of that. But now things are slowly starting to open up and in-person performances are starting to happen again. But for the last 2 years, the artists were really affected throughout this pandemic. So yeah, I'd love to hear what during those last 2 years, what each of you have been up to. Let me start with Linda this time, if I may.
Well, because we practice at the language school, it's been closed, right? And so as soon as they did open, we started practicing. We have been practicing distanced and masked. Luckily, they have this huge hall where we practice. So we are now 10 people, so we're pretty big. But the hall is big enough for us to be able to distance. Um, the restrictions are just being lifted now, where masks are not required inside. But I think some of us, I have a respiratory condition, so it's very difficult for me to play in a mask. So I have been unmasking, but still we're at a distance. Um, but I think most people are still masked, and I think we're going to be for a while. One of our members works in the downtown east side, and so she's very careful. Um, and others of us work in schools, which are also lifting the requirements. It's a little bit scary for me, but we do have a gig coming up, yay, um, which is a co-sponsored by Powell Street Festival and Vancouver Independent Music, and it's a collaboration. It's another iteration of our collaboration with Sokum, which we're really happy about. And I'm just trying to see, something came up on my screen and I thought it was I'm talking too long, but it isn't. Okay. So that is coming up at the end of May, and we're quite looking forward to that. And we will be performing unmasked, but I think we'll probably be practicing masked. I don't quite understand all these things. Um, I do know everybody in Sawagi is vaccinated. Um, that the group we'll be singing with is vaccinated, and so I feel pretty safe being with them, and which is why I removed my mask. And I've even eaten with them. Oh my God! So you know, um, life is looking up, but I am still being cautious.
Well put. Yeah, and for anyone who hasn't played Taiko, it is not easy to play with the mask on at all. But of course, these are just the small sacrifices we have to make. Just quickly, Linda, how can people learn more about Sawagi? And do you offer like classes, or if people are interested in like joining the group, like how would one kind of gain access to Taiko through your group?
We have a website, sawagitaiko.com. We do give workshops. However, we haven't recently. Well, of course, we've done nothing recently. But, and, I kind of have to tell you, we're not very good. We're not very self initiating. And we had planned a 30th anniversary concert the year COVID hit. And so that's still kind of, there, maybe 35th, who knows? I don't know. But we do want to do a self present at some point. Um, but we aren't running classes at this point, and we're not, because we're already 10 people, we're not really recruiting. Um, Recruitment is a pain. I'm so sorry. I can't tell you how many people I've trained. And I'm really not keen about training lots more. I think I'll leave that to somebody else in the group when it's time. But right now, it's not time.
Okay, great. So, but yeah, you do have a website, so please check out Sawagi Taiko for any performances. And yes, unlike playing a Western instrument like violin or piano, there's not really a conservatory of Taiko, so each group has to individually train their own members, which is a huge commitment. I totally understand. How about Teri-Lynn? What have you guys been up to during the pandemic? And also, what events do you have coming up?
Well, yeah, when COVID really started to do its thing, at least here in Alberta, and the restrictions came down the pipe, we had a big gig planned for the day after everything got completely shut down. So we we were cruising along at a good speed at that point. So we thought, well, we might as well just try to keep that momentum going. So, we did everything we could to keep our members engaged and active. So we had, virtual practices and even just virtual social gatherings among members of the group. And, we'd get together and chit chat online and play games and that sort of thing. When we could, we would practice outside, even in the snow. There were times we wore mittens and toques and so on, but we figured that, that's better than not practicing at all. So we did what we could. Once things lightened up a little bit and we were able to gather in larger numbers, even outdoors, we filmed a couple videos that we were able to use to submit to some of the virtual festivals and performances and such that were being put on. So we managed. I can't see there was any point where I went for a long period of time without playing any taiko. So we still have a lot of catching up to do, but we hung on by a thread for, the majority of the worst of the pandemic, at least what I'm hoping is the worst. But as for what's coming up, we're actually planning something right now that I can't really mention just yet, but we're hopefully soon. We're also helping with the planning of the regional taiko gathering that'll be held here in Calgary in July. And we're starting to hold, public workshops again. We have some performances coming up, and we're starting to get more requests for performances. Fireworks festivals, omatsuri, of course, even a wedding. One very cool thing that I should mention that's coming up in a few weeks is, I don't know if you folks know Art Lee and Tokara. They are doing a live performance in their hometown in Ida City, I believe. And so for their finale piece, they're playing a song called Pop, which it's just a fantastic song. It's great fun to play. We had learned it at a workshop in Kelowna a few years ago. So we will perform live with them. So they'll be on stage. Maybe real time is a better term to use than live. So we will perform real time on video. They will put all of the out-of-towners, I guess, on the big screen behind the live performers, and we'll be playing real time with them. Oh, and the best part of this is because of the time difference between Japan and us, we will in fact be performing at midnight our time. so that just doubles the fun. So yeah, we have lots of good things coming up. So looking forward to a busy summer full of taiko.
That's great. Yeah, it's great that you were trying to be as active as you could throughout the pandemic, and it seems like a lot of taiko groups had to really pivot, learning how to use all this technical equipment, cameras and audio, and meeting on Zoom. And it's as it's impossible to practice with the group on Zoom because of the audio lag. So it's really quite interesting to hear how each group kind of adapted. And which leads me to Young. What have you been up to during the pandemic?
So if we back up to December of 2019, we had just finished a huge theatrical production, and all the apprentices of 2 years have become members, and it was just like a whole new generation of raw. We were about to start and thinking about like touring, and great, let's go. And then the shutdown, and at that point we were rehearsing out of a community center, so everything shut down. And then probably about 5 months into the pandemic lockdown, the community center director contacted me and said, "We're taking your storage space. We need it for other things, but you can still rent." And I was like, "Yeah, we're not going to haul our drums back and forth twice a week. It's just not going to work." So everything went into a U-Haul storage unit, and we were kind of sitting there with another, again, a huge decision to make of like, well, Raw had a good run, 20 years. That's a great run for an arts organization. Is this when we fold, or do we do that pivot? And we had a little nest egg, and we said, let's find our own studio. Like for decades, every Raw member wanted to have our own studio. Let's see if we can find one. And like Kiyoshi said, the rent is out of control here in Toronto. And so I think I looked at over 12 places. Most places were like, drumming group. That was the last thing they would hear. Drumming group, hello, hello, you know. And then we got lucky. We got a place that is above a mechanic garage, and so there's no noise issues. It is kind of a rough space that we had to, you know, put together. We got really lucky, and so grateful for the Canadian Heritage. We got a Cultural Spaces Fund grant. So a lot of what we were able to do with the space, putting a dance floor down, getting curtains, getting some lights, getting some sound equipment, uh, just getting it set up for being able to present virtually, all that stuff was through that funding. So now that we've got the space, we are offering beginning taiko, beta style, and then beginning everything. Really, it's one of those things that we're like, we'll give you the beginning, and then if you get good, we'll kick you over to Kiyoshi. um, and we have just started to formulate because Raw is really focused on being a performance ensemble. We are also launching a community group, sort of formulating what that looks like. Is it look like Raw membership, or is it more open than Raw membership? So we're working on that. The big event that we are doing this summer is the Toronto Taiko Festival, which is August 19th through the 21st. This was supposed to happen in 2020, and they just it got postponed. So the theme will be Women in Taiko. So we have 4 amazing women who are going to be offering workshops, and then hopefully lots of Taiko groups in the concert, and a public forum talking about women in Taiko. We did a webinar version in 2020, and we want to kind of continue the conversation and see if there's any other thoughts, if things have evolved, and on that front. I think that's it.
That's great. No, it's and the Toronto Taiko Festival is a very ambitious project. It's is it your third or fourth now that you've done? Fourth. Okay, wow. So that's great. And so for all 3 of you, you do have websites. Maybe they can post your websites where they can find more information about your groups, classes, upcoming performances, things like that. So I believe that wraps everything up. Is there any final words any of you would like to say, or?
This is great. Thank you for creating this forum.
It was a really,
Yes.
really lovely discussion, and hopefully very enlightening for people in Canada and beyond who want to learn a little bit more about the Canadian taiko landscape. I want to thank the Japan Foundation Toronto for organizing this panel discussion, and of course to our panelists, Teri-Lynn from Midnight Taiko Kai, Young from Raging Asian Women Taiko Drummers, or RAW, and Linda from Sawagi Taiko. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's been fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you